The interaction problem. It's one of the core topics that you will undoubtedly encounter as a philosophy undergrad student, but what is it? Well, it's an objection to substance dualism, the view that the mind and the body are two distinct substances which share no properties. Descartes was a major proponent of this view. He thought that the body was extended physical stuff with properties such as size and shape and motion, whereas the mind was unextended, non-physical stuff that only had the property of thinking. The interaction problem asks, if we have these two distinct substances which share no properties, how can the two, well, interact? How can a non-physical, spiritual substance impart motion onto a physical, extended substance? Just take the example of ghosts. When they go up to a table, they don't knock it over, they just pass right through it because they're not a physical substance. Although, honestly, now that I think about it, ghosts aren't actually the best example because you can still see ghosts in the movies, and if it was a purely spiritual substance, it wouldn't reflect light. And also when a ghost goes over a table, it tends to blow out a candle or make things shake, which doesn't make any sense because wind is done by pushing the physical fluid substance that is air. But it gets the basic idea across. It doesn't really make intuitive sense to us to think that a spirit substance could push a physical substance. We're going to explore the interaction problem by looking at the most famous piece of work on it, the correspondence between Descartes and Princess Elisabeth. Now, this is a correspondence that I really think everyone should read because it's really short, only 5 pages long, and if you're really lazy and don't want to read the whole thing, I'm going to attach in the description my translation of it into modern day English that's only about 2 pages long, and it's just very funny to read because they're hitting on each other and it's awkward, and the whole time Princess Elisabeth is playing dumb but at the same time making him seem stupid. And it's just very significant because back then, women were barely allowed to read books, let alone slam dunk on philosophers, so it's pretty significant and a very fun read. The correspondence goes something like this. First, Princess Elisabeth asks, "Hey Descartes, looking cute. Quick question, dumb female brain here. How does the immaterial soul move material bodies?" This is just a dumb female thought, but doesn't imparting motion require contact between extended surfaces? And then Descartes responds, "Damn, babe, I'm glad that you sent me a letter because if we talked in person, I would be so distracted by that rockin' bod, I wouldn't even be able to think. But let me help that female brain out. It goes something like this. You know how heaviness makes things fall? You know how if an object is really heavy, it falls to the ground? It's kind of like that. The earth isn't touching the heavy object, but there's something in it that's pulling it and attracting it towards the earth. So maybe that'll help, illuminate the idea in your brain." And then Elisabeth responds, "Oh my god, wow, thank you so much for making that make sense to me. That's super smart. My only question is, why does that mean that what is pulling the object down is immaterial? Wouldn't that just mean that we don't fully understand how material things attract each other? Because in my dumb female mind, it feels like the reason those two things are attracting each other is because they have mass, and that's how gravity works. So if a soul doesn't have mass, why would that work? Sorry, I'm just so stupid. I don't get it." And then Descartes responds, "See, I think I know what your problem is. You're thinking about this way too much. I don't know if you knew this, I actually only spend 2 hours a year thinking, and so things become way simpler in my brain. Just go and ask any random idiot on the street, and they have no problem thinking about how the mind moves the body. They think about moving their hand, and their hand moves, and voila, it's done. Your problem is that you're trying to hold in your brain both this idea that the mind can move the body and the idea that the mind is immaterial. And I think that you need to just stop thinking about those two things at the same time, and then it won't be so confusing for you, And then Elisabeth responds, "Wow, you're still so nice for dealing with an idiot like me, and you're totally right, I do have this very basic common sense idea that the mind moves the body, but wouldn't that just mean that the mind is also extended? Wouldn't that fix all the problems?" And then Descartes just never responds. So clearly Elisabeth gets the better of Descartes in that interaction. And I didn't make any of that up. I rephrased it a little bit, but everything I said was in their correspondence. There was actually a section in his second letter to Elisabeth where Descartes said that her problem was that she was trying to keep in her mind the idea of the unextendedness of the soul and the idea of the soul interacting with the body at the same time. And that if she just didn't think about the two at the same time, she wouldn't notice his contradiction, and then it would be fine, which is clearly idiotic. However, Descartes might actually be right. Not because he said anything smart, but more that he just kind of tripped into the right answer. Because really, this is all a problem of how we conceive of mind-body interaction, not whether such interaction is logically consistent. Clearly, minds cannot physically interact with bodies, which is just tautologically true since minds are not physical. However, this does not exclude the possibility that there is another manner in which they interact. We conceive of causality as operating via physical contact between two bodies, but that's not even how physics works. Physics doesn't operate via push-pull mechanisms, so it doesn't make sense to require that of our explanations for how the mental interacts with the physical. I mean, just look at any of the laws of physics. First of all, Descartes already covered gravity. It clearly happens over a distance. It's just some magical force that attracts two masses to each other. Electromagnetism literally creates force fields that push and pull objects from a distance. The strong and weak nuclear force both also operate at a distance, and even the very idea that we have of contact is the result of the weak nuclear force pushing electrons against each other, which happens at a distance. So the entire premise of Elisabeth's argument that you need extension and surfaces in order for two things to interact just doesn't hold up. In reality, there is no how to basic functions in the universe. There is no base level explanation for how gravity causes two objects to be attracted to one another. Now, you science nerds may be screaming into the laptop, well, gravity causes two objects to be attracted to each other by bending space-time, and so then one object just kind of falls along that curvature. But that just pushes the question down the road, because then I could then ask you, how does the curvature of space-time cause one object to move in a certain direction or another? Ultimately, it's just the way things are. So asking for an in-depth, conceivable explanation for how the mental and the physical interact doesn't make any sense. It's a little stupid, but I can just say that there are psychophysical laws which govern the interaction of the mental and the physical, and end there. I don't have to make it conceivable. I don't have to give some sort of logical explanation, because every single law of physics does not have a conceivable, logical, coherent explanation for it. It just is a testable hypothesis that is the way it is, and that's the end of the story. So it may not be very satisfactory, but psychophysical laws could be a real thing. Assuming that we test them and prove that they are real, you don't have to be able to conceive of it. It doesn't have to make any sense. It doesn't have to coincide with our common sense view of how causality operates. It can just be.